let's lean into that a little bit more, Kristen, because one of the chapters in Good Pictures, Bad Pictures talks about addiction. And I don't think a lot of people think, oh, that's something I need to talk to my kid about. And so why is it important for our kids at a young age to understand the idea of an addiction?
Because these kids are growing up in the most addiction prone society environment ever. There are people that are brilliant, that are working very hard and getting paid very well to create games and platforms that are highly addicting. Highly addicting. I just learned something about, I mean, the whole the whole purpose behind TikTok is to get you completely addicted, and they are working night and day figuring out how to do it better. In fact, they instituted a filtering. So when you do a TikTok video, it automatically makes you look better, right? And so it's so important that we recognize that we're growing up, we're raising kids in a highly addicting society. So whether it's digital addiction, screen addictions, porn addictions, and all these substance addictions, right? Now we protect kids pretty well from, alcohol, tobacco, those kinds of things. I would say most 8-year-olds can't get meth, right? Unless their parents are into it. But pornography is the thing that they can get their hands on and their eyes on. And it's so easy for them. So I just think that kids need to understand the brain and how it can become addicted to anything. And really, it's all the same process in the brain. It's just different ways of inputting, but it all works on the dopamine. It works on that reward system in the brain. And so we explain that to children, and turns out they love to learn about their brain. They love to learn. It's interesting to them. They like to feel like they're trusted with important information. So whether your child is confronted with pornography, whether your child is confronted with addicting substances, they need to understand, in order to avoid and protect themselves, they need to understand the whole process of addiction. And I just think that, every kid needs to understand this. I mean, we need to understand how to keep our teeth clean. We need to understand, all these things. We also need to understand how to keep our brains protected and functioning so that we can grow up healthy and happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know in my own story, that's something I look back on, at my teenage years, and realizing no one ever explained a concept to me of what could be developing in my brain. I think the only pattern that church has kind of understood is that, well, lust can turn into pornography, and pornography can turn into affairs, and, and then you would ruin your marriage. And it's like, well, I'm not married, and I think I'll be better by then. So you kind of stay in a behavior because you've been taught that it's kind of a boy thing. It's about hormones and lust, and, isn't that kind of normal? And just this understanding of, wow, there's a chemical process taking place in my brain, and there's a law of diminishing returns there. And I mean, all these were things. I was 30 years old before I was really starting to understand them. And I do feel like now I may have, as a teenager, still made a lot of the same foolish choices. I don't know. But like you said, at least I would have been equipped with an understanding and a deeper sense of, man, what I'm doing could be damaging my own body and my own future. I think I could have taken a different tack towards why this was an important thing to tackle versus just, well, it's a bad thing, it feels bad, I should stop it, and not really having any of that understanding. So for me, it's that idea of, man, if I felt that as a teenager, how much more so might it have benefited me had I known it even prior to that and had that understanding going in to the intensity of teenage years.
Well, if my job as a parent is to disciple my kid to the point where when they leave my house, whether it's at 18 and they go to school and they do their thing, or it's they leave my house at 8 years old to go to a friend's house, that they're prepared to navigate the world around them. That's my job. And so what I'm hearing you say, Kristen, is this the language of addiction should be in our discipleship pathway or paradigm. It should be language that we use, because this is something they're going to run into at some point in their life, whether it's, addiction to screens or TV and movies or pornography or alcohol. They're going to run into situations where this can become something for them, or they have people they're in relationship with that struggle with these things. And so it feels like our responsibility then at that point to use language like addiction so that they understand what's coming.
Yeah. And I've heard people say, oh, don't call it addiction, because then it'll either make them feel so ashamed, or it will make them feel like, oh, well, I'm addicted, so I can't do anything about it. Well, I don't think either of those is true. Honestly, I have talked with so many people that said, once I found out that it wasn't like I was a morally bad person, I had an addiction. And now I could see a road forward. I could go through a 12-step program, or I could get counseling, or I could work on this, and I could get out of this addiction. I could at least, get myself in a place where it wasn't, causing me to be so dysfunctional and so ashamed. And so I think that you're right. This has to be a part of, like you said, raising our children and teaching them what they need to know, which is our job, right? Because you said when they leave your house, whether they're 8 or whether they're 18 or whenever, you want to prepare them for the situations they're going to find themselves in, not the ones you grew up with, not the ones you wish they had, but the reality that's out there. And the reality is pornography is being pushed to kids. They are getting into it at very young ages, and they are imitating it. They're imitating it on each other. It is fueling a huge skyrocketing trend of child on child harmful sexual behavior. And if you think it's bad that your kid is seeing porn, it's much worse if your child has been harmed by another child sexually because of porn. And it's much worse if it's your kid that's doing that. And we just want to avoid those situations as much as possible by teaching our children and continuing these conversations. So I encourage parents to get the facts, arm the kids, and continue the conversation, and do that continually. That is an iterative loop that you're always educating yourself, you're always educating and arming your children, and you're always continuing those conversations.